Let's talk more about gender-based violence and what today means. Paulette Senior is President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation. Paulette, thanks for joining me today. And it goes without saying, December 6, 1989 was a horrific and tragic day. Why does what happened in Montreal remain significant after so many years?
Well, as you said, it was tragic. It was the worst mass shooting that we have seen in this country for quite a while, up until 2020. So it was really a moment in history that then became a movement, to be quite frank, a movement to address and to respond and, in fact, end gender-based violence in this country. And it was important because I think it highlighted what many already knew, that gender inequality was a problem, that gender-based violence was a problem. But until we saw it so horrific in front of us, until we heard the story right across this country, I don't think that it was really taken seriously. So, as I said, it was a moment in time that then generated a movement to be able to respond to a number of issues related to gender-based violence.
Okay, so talk to me more about the situation today in Canada, because there are some staggering numbers out there. A woman or girl is killed every 48 hours on average in this country. Nearly 70% of women know another woman who has been abused. What do numbers like that say about the scope of gender-based violence in this country in the year 2023?
It's a bit of a stark picture, isn't it? It paints a picture of what the reality is. We also know that just under half of women in Canada have experienced gender-based violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. So what it's saying is that this is not an uncommon issue, and it certainly shouldn't be an issue that we remain silent about. And the silence has really done significant damage to being able to address it. And for every 48 hours, I don't know about you, but when I heard the latest stats, it made my head spin. It really, for me, just made it so clear that we still have a clear and present danger to women's lives in this country, to girls' lives, to the lives of gender-diverse people, and that we have so much work still to be done. And unless we take concerted action, such as what would come with declaring gender-based violence an epidemic, that we were doomed to keep seeing these kinds of numbers.
Right, I want to ask you about that, about those declarations, because we have seen some local governments declaring intimate partner violence as an epidemic. What is the significance of making that kind of declaration?
Mm-hmm. Well, we saw that with the recent killing in Sault Ste. Marie, that this was done by that municipal government, and I think it's a good thing. I think that they're hearing. Those of us who have been doing this work for a long time, we know that when we hear the news and we can easily put together the indicators to tell what this is even before the news or it's reported in this way, because we've been able to learn that. And so what I think is important when we're talking about declaring this an epidemic is that it then sort of galvanizes the kinds of resources and attention and support that's needed to address it head on, such as we did with the pandemic and such as we do with disasters. That this is no different, and we don't need to treat it differently. And so we know that federally it's been declared an epidemic. We know that several provinces and regions have declared an epidemic, but it is yet to be done in Ontario. And I think that's an important thing, because there is no community in this country that's not touched by gender-based violence.
All right, let me ask you then about the federal government, because the government today and the Prime Minister touting the federal government's gender-based violence strategy, touting its national action plan with the provinces and territories. So at the top in this country, at the federal level, what do you think is missing right now?
So it is really important that we have a national action plan to end gender-based violence in this country. Many of us worked to create that national action plan in partnership with the federal government, so I'm really glad to see it in place. To me, what's missing is the sort of coordinated effort to make sure that we're measuring, that we're monitoring, and that we can see and track the results of that work. It's not yet known what each province and territory is going to do and how they're going to address it and how those funds are going to be spent. And so I would like to see that information. I'd like to understand the kinds of investments that are being made. I'd like to be able to make sure that these regions are sitting down with folks who do work in this area and listening to thought leaders, right? And implementing some of these practices that we know are going to work. But if they're doing that in isolation, that is where I worry.
Now, here in Ottawa, the federal NDP has also raised the issue of $150 million in cuts to shelters. Do you share those concerns? What's the significance of that?
Well, I think what that's referring to is the additional dollars that were added because of the pandemic to the funding of shelters. And so I think that's probably what's being referred to. And then, as we know, with the investments that were made for many things during the pandemic, that those investments were pulled back as the pandemic tailored off or continues to tailor off. I guess the point is that the tailoring off of the impact of gender-based violence has still not gone down, but the money has. And so I think that's what we're talking about in terms of what are the kinds of investments that's needed to really address gender-based violence at the community level, and what are the coordinating efforts that's needed, not just from the federal government, but from the municipalities, from the various towns, from the various provinces and territories to make that happen.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about governments and what they need to do on gender-based violence. Let me end with this question for you. What do Canadians themselves need to be doing?
And, that's a really important question. I'm so glad you asked it. And there are things that we can do. We did a research just recently that showed that 90% of Canadians actually think that gender-based violence is everyone's responsibility. Yet under half of us actually think that we would know what to do if someone opened up and shared that they were in an abusive relationship. But what's really great is that there are opportunities to learn how to do that. In 2020, the Canadian Women's Foundation launched the Signal for Help, which is a hand signal that we created so that you can indicate to someone that you needed help in any circumstance. But if you don't know how to use such a signal or any such signal, if you don't know how to respond to it, then that's the problem. So I encourage Canadians to go to signalresponse.ca and learn what they can do to support someone, and to do that in a non-judgmental way, in a supportive way that says that you care. And to help us actually end the silence and stigma around gender-based violence, so that we can actually move forward to a much more aware population, to a condition where folks can know that they're valued and treasured and that people care about them.
All right. Paulette Senior is President and CEO of the Canadian Women's Foundation. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.